item of new business, preliminary plat review for Davie Street Cottages.
Hello again, Roger Walden. This is an application for a preliminary plat, and it's been an application that has generated interest and discussion. Davie Street, again, very, very close, very walkable from where we're sitting tonight. And this property is zoned R10 pocket neighborhood, and I used the term walkable just now intentionally because that's what that pocket neighborhood is supposed to be. It's supposed to be creating and allowing for development of a nature that is walkable, is compact, is designed to have units clustered together in proximity to our downtown area. So that's the purpose of the R10 zoning district. And that's how this property is owned. So it's about the two parcels together is about an acre in size, and what's being proposed down there is 9 residential dwelling units, and then a common parking area, gathering space, and so it's a subdivision, and so it's one of the things that has been very clear as we've gone through this process, gone to the planning board twice on this. And there are concerns about tree preservation, concerns about storm drainage and stormwater management, and and landscaping. The one thing that's clear is that this application meets all of the requirements of Pittsboro's zoning and subdivision regulations for a pocket neighborhood. And so went to the planning board the first evening, and with the staff recommendation that the planning board recommend approval to the Board of Commissioners of this neighborhood, that it meets all of the requirements. And there was a good bit of discussion and among the board members and applicant and neighbors. And the decision at the end of that night was let's give ourselves a little bit more time to look at this and see what other adjustments might be made. The applicant took the material and made some adjustments, talked to some of the folks, and you'll be hearing from the applicant tonight about some of the changes that were made, not required, but that the applicant chose to make. We came back to the planning board, and again, staff was recommending recommending that the planning board recommend approval to the Board of Commissioners. And again, robust discussion that evening, and lots of different opinions. And the end result of the planning board's meeting, there's a motion made to recommend approval of this preliminary plan application to you, and the vote on that motion was 3-3. So there is no recommendation that comes to you from the planning board because it was a tie vote. It's not a motion to recommend denial. It's not a motion to recommend approval. It's a no action recommendation. So we've got no recommendation. Your staff continues to believe that this application meets the requirements of zoning and subdivision regulations, and so we are recommending to you that you approve the preliminary plan. And I expect that you'll want to be hearing tonight from the applicant and describing in detail what they are doing, what they're proposing, and the nature of the discussions today. Thank you.
You want to hear from the applicant?
Good evening. I'm Mike Dasher. I'm with Orange Communities. Also joining me, Landon Lovelace, who's the project engineer. I guess I'd like to start by asking if I can see a copy of what's been submitted to you as far as the petition, because I have not seen that, so I'm not sure what some of the issues are. I guess at the outset, I just want to reiterate our commitment to work with the neighbors to do whatever we can to alleviate any concerns. I think they've mostly been related to off-site stormwater issues, and then again, we're happy to do whatever we can to address those. Aside from that, I'd be happy to answer any particular questions or go into any details that you guys see necessary.
I have a few questions now, but I don't want to address right now, but I know that, I was at the planning board meeting, and I know it was several, quite lengthy in discussion, neighbors and all like this, and, I think possibly maybe Mr. Grusebeck or somebody should bring some of these comments to other board members if we're not here. Or maybe Roger.
I can talk about that if you'd like.
Yeah, I think some of the board members might be interested in hearing some of the complaints and all that went through that night to the planning board. Yeah.
I guess I did a little shorthand when I called it a robust discussion. Because it was. The couple of issues, and one of them prominent is stormwater management. There is water that flows through this site, comes in from the back and across the street flows onto properties across the street. And so one of the big points of focus was be sure that this applicant, in designing this development of this lot, is meeting all of the town's stormwater management requirements, which I believe they are. Fred Boyle was looking at this very carefully, and in terms of managing the flow of water, set there is so as to not make conditions in the future after this development any worse than they are now. So there is not a requirement that this development correct problems that they're not creating. So but they will be creating some additional stormwater circumstances with the building and impervious surface and so on, and so they're required to manage those, and so they've got several stormwater devices on the site. Some of the conversation at the planning board was, but that's not going to make things any better for us downstream, and I think the answer to that is yes, that's correct. And one of the things I mentioned that the applicant has offered to do, is not required, but to help do some additional grading to help move the water past those houses across the street, those properties across the street, in a way that better than it is today. So anyway, that one issue, clearly stormwater, and again, my shorthand version is the people were concerned, both nearby residents and some planning board members were also just wanted to be sure that this isn't doing any damage, not creating any problems that don't exist already. Wondering if there's anything that can be done on this site to help, and a little, but not a lot. So that's one issue. Second issue is trees, and there are a couple of trees on this site that are going to be coming down, and that is. And none of us like that. All of us wish the trees wouldn't have to come down. So there are a couple that you see right in the middle of the site that, and we worked hard on that, looking, and this was staff and applicant, looking at ways that some of those, one or two of those trees right in the middle of the site might be able to be preserved. And our conclusion was it can't be. And part of it has to do with the relation to stormwater, that because of the slope of the site and because of the requirement that the applicant has to put in some stormwater devices closer to Davie Street, the slopes are such that the roots of the trees on site would be damaged to the point that the trees could not be saved. So that was another point, Mr. Farrell, a lot of discussion about that, and a number of comments about people lamenting the loss of those trees. And one of the things that the applicant did following the planning board meeting was to give some additional attention to landscaping on the site, and to try and do as much as possible in the open space on the site to to plant some new trees. I think that those were probably the two biggest issues that there was the most discussion about. And excuse me, also the density, and that's that again is is something that we heard at the planning board meeting, that this is 10 the zoning allows 10 units per acre, and this is an acre of land, and so there are 9 dwelling units here. So that is a significantly higher density than the properties around it. And one of the things that I have been saying is that this R10 zoning was placed here purposefully by the board because it's close to downtown. It's consistent with trying to achieve highly livable, walkable neighborhoods and so on. But it is contextually different from the properties around that don't currently have that level of density. They might in the future, but they don't now.
Questions from the board for either the planner or the applicant?
It's about the storm. I was looking at those photographs that were passed around. Is that something, I don't know.
Down the street, I guess.
Can you look at those, please? I was just concerned about how those actually look right now. And if they're going to do something across the street, is this something that needs to be fixed before they start building?
And I wonder if you might have some input about what your thoughts are on it, I'd like to hear from you.
Need to know.
Yes.
I'm Landon Lovelace, I'm the engineer for the project, and I'm happy to answer any stormwater questions. I would actually love to see the photos as well. I'm guessing they're probably across the street on Ms. Farrell's property and not on the property, but I'll try to expand a little bit on the great explanations that Roger gave on some of the discussions that we had.
It was across the street, that's what it was.
Okay, so from a stormwater standpoint, there's an existing pond that's to the west of our site. It's got an existing outfall that currently comes to our site, and there's a drainage swale that goes through the middle of the site and goes to a culvert that's underneath Davie Street. Where that culvert goes underneath Davie Street, there's also an existing drainage ditch or a drainage swale that goes across Mrs. Farrell's property. I'm sure that's what the photos are. So in a good storm, you know, the swell fills up as it goes underneath Davie Street. It goes to her property, and then ultimately it continues to go east. There's a low-lying area, and it ends up coming down to the south and crosses business. Again, as Roger mentioned, that that's an existing drainage condition that is not being exacerbated by any of the development that we're doing, but the developer has agreed to help alleviate some of those. So the first thing is making sure that all the water that's going to the site isn't going to damage anything that we're developing on the site. So in working with the town engineer, Fred Royal, typically when we're sizing stormwater pipes for conveyance on a site like this, we'll size them to handle a 10-year storm, which is basically a storm that you would expect to get once every 10 years. It's a pretty good sized storm. And speaking with Fred and looking at the nature of the development where we're at, he asked us to go ahead and do the size of the pipes for the 25-year storm, which is even more significant of a storm. So the existing bypass system, which basically the only function of the bypass system is to take the water that's currently coming from off-site, not being generated by this site at all, but coming from off-site and bypassing it, which is what it's doing right now. It's just doing it in a ditch to our site. When you get down to Davie Street, there's an existing culvert that goes underneath Davie Street that was actually laid backwards when it was put in. So what it actually does right now is it ponds water onto our site. or onto the owner's side. So part of the question was, okay, well, if we fix that culvert, which needs to be fixed, because right now it's creating a problem on our site, does that let more water go? Does it let the water go faster? Those kind of things. So the answer on does it let more water go? The answer is no. It lets the same exact amount of water going there. And if you lay the pipe correctly, the water comes out of the end of the pipe more quickly. But we've got a plunge pool, which is a velocity dissipator. Basically, it slows the water down before it goes to the same exact area where it's going right now. One of the things that came out of that first planning meeting was, well, let's look downstream, and Mr. Royal went and met with Ms. Farrell and kind of walked her property, and then subsequently I went out there as well, and didn't get a chance to catch up with her, but her son and another gentleman were out there, and we went and walked back around the property. And it's a relatively easy fix for an existing drainage problem. So we sized, basically, there's an existing swale there, and it's a V shape. We proposed that we would kind of flatten that out a little bit, and actually give the water the correct place to go, so it's not coming up into her planting beds and up near her house. So again, that's not something that's required by the ordinance. We're meeting and exceeding the ordinance for all the stuff that we're doing on site, but Mr. Dasher has agreed to do that off site to help alleviate an existing drainage issue. Does that answer your question on the stormwater?
I'm still concerned.
Sure.
So I think what you're saying is this bypass pipe running through the middle of the site is collecting water only from upstream,
Correct.
and none of the impervious surface that this project would generate is going to flow into that pipe before it goes through the bioretention cell.
Correct. That's exactly correct. So I'll say it again.
So that the water from that side is not going to across the street, it's going to have
Right, the additional runoff that's generated, obviously, the site's grass right now, and when we build the parking lot and build buildings on there, there's gonna be more runoff generated than there is now. And for the state requirement and Pittsbor requirement, we're required to take all of that additional runoff of the stormwater division, which is a bioretention cell or a rainbow, which is located in the front of the site. So all of the new impervious, all of the development on the site going to that bioretention cell before it's ultimately being released. They go to the same point ultimately that the bypass goes to, but not before it's treated and held for the town of Pittsboro and state requirements.
And that requirement is detention of the 1 year?
1 year, 24-hour storm, that's correct. And we actually, we exceed that. We detain not only the 1 year, but the 2 year storm. And then we see less than 10% increase in the 10-year and 100-year storm. So we're exceeding what the town of Pittsboro requirement, the state requirement is by a good bit.
And that's based on that design of that bioretention.
That's right.
So, I've got some issues with the cell. I mean, I understand it's a very tight site. I think you're trying to put a lot on there. I think you've got a lot of requirements to meet. But I look at things like that ditch, existing roadside ditch that's now going to get piped. And I see that pipe basically straddling the right-of-way line. And I see it very, very close to bioretention cell, such that if it were ever to be dug up again, it would destroy the bioretention cell. So that's a concern of mine, obviously, that who's going to maintain that pipe, and do we have public right-of-way within which to do so, or do you have to grant an easement for access? And can that biocell shift back? The berm seems to be, I think there are geometric issues with it as well, such as a 2-foot wide top to the berm. I know it's not detaining a lot, but I don't think that's probably with the BMP manual. I know there are certain things that say it should be a 3-to-1 slope. Graphically, it's graded at a 2-to-1 slope, so do you really have the area you're thinking that you've got for detention? I'm really very, very concerned about stormwater. And I understand that you're trying to bypass a lot of the flow and not have any effect on it and let it go exactly where it was going previously. Ms. Farrell, did you accept their offer for the improvements downstream on your property?
Well, I like to bring in pipe lay on that with all that,
So we might very well grant approval and you'll have no ability to execute that plan because the neighbor's not going to let you on their property. Which brings me to another point from a graphical perspective. I see the plunge pool. I see the plunge pool is within the public right of way. But is it actually drawn to scale? It is. And so I think it's going to have about 1.5 feet of water sitting in it until it evaporates.
That's correct.
Okay. And that's that. I'm familiar with the plunge pools being quite large.
For larger flows.
Yeah. And this is going to treat the 10-year storm? Or
The plunge pools for the 10-year.
the 10-year? Okay.
And again, the downstream swale is to help with the velocity of the swale downstream. I can understand the concerns. Number one, the bioretention is sized appropriately. It's designed and graded per the BOC manual and per my 13 years of professional experience designing DMVs in North Carolina. As far as the offsite stuff goes, specifically the swale and the desire to have 30-inch pipe, I'm not sure what that would be based off of, but I just want to remind you that's not a requirement. That's something that Mike is willing to do to help alleviate an existing situation. And for an easy fix, you can take a small V channel and flatten it out and give it. If we start looking at burying a pipe, I don't know that there's an elevation difference enough to actually bury a pipe and get the elevation that you need.
Right, it's a lot of dirt. Well, regarding the grading, the detail says it's at a 3-1 slope. Graphically, it's clearly a 2-1 slope. So that's where I come up with the idea of, is it? I mean, if you can't draw it on paper, clearly you can't put it in the field. So that's where I'm coming from with that.
Which spot specifically?
The dam.
The berm?
Yeah.
And the berm is not a dam, so that berm isn't necessarily a dam. The road acts as a dam. The berm is there to keep drainage from the runoff that's in Davie Street from coming into the bioretention. It doesn't function as a dam.
Well, if we think of a dam, regardless of size, as an impoundment,
Right.
then it,
But it's not impounding. I mean, it's diverting the water from Davie Street.
so that bioretention cell's not going to fill up with water?
It will.
Okay, and what's going to hold it back?
The
Earth? Okay. A couple of other things that I noticed about the plans that I'd like you to consider is you have a cross-section going through side to side, I guess north to south. And you got a retaining wall on one side, and on the other side you have a berm. So essentially, you're creating a condition where the water previously leaving the adjoiner's property is flowing through the middle of the property and out to the pipe running underneath the roadway. But the way you've got it graded, you're actually going to create a swale along the property line and have that water run down the property line and then into the roadside ditch. So really kind of changing how that water flows and relying on water flowing on the joiner's property that didn't heretofore flow. So instead of having berms, I would ask you to look at putting swales in. I think it would also be I didn't see any safety fall protection on the retaining wall. Are you planning?
There, and for North Carolina building code, when they go to get a building permit for it, it's over 30 inches in length, that'd be
So would
It's
you-
an ongoing issue in the engineering community on whether or not, who's responsible to call out a show fall.
Right, and so would you be interested, I mean, I think the owner would be interested in specifying what that is and not leaving it up to the contractor to design a solution. On the north side, I think it makes a statement that buffering or screening will occur by a fence and or landscape planting. You know, given the character of the neighborhood, it'd be really helpful to know what that is, to specify it so that, you know, there aren't surprises during construction. So one of the biggest concerns that I have is, right now, as you mentioned, it's a meadow. And it does have a pipe that's tilted the wrong way, underneath that roadway. But it's essentially flat. So it's, you know, it's not hindering the flow dramatically. And so when a big storm comes, let's say the 100-year storm comes, you know, that meadow can fill up with a lot of water before it tops the road. Right now, you're essentially creating a dam and allowing the 25-year storm to run through a pipe underneath the site. So when that 100-year storm comes, I'm worried about all those houses, all 9 of them, and how they're going to be affected by that flow. And have you done a study that gives you the knowledge of where that flow is going to go on your site? And could you put it on the plans so that the builders and everybody who follows knows exactly where that boundary is and what the risk is, and so that they can put their floors of these buildings at the appropriate elevation?
We can and we have. We show land relief on the grading plan. Modeling is a 100-year elevation over a site like that. It does not through a channel is much harder than low exposure. We can certainly put notes on there that, you know, these are all going to be crawl space foundations. So just by the fact that they're crawl space, you'd anticipate a finished floor that's at least 30 inches above the existing ground around it. And the site itself is already up 2 or 3 feet above the 25-year elevation. But we can certainly put some notes, maybe that set a minimum finished floor elevation, something to that effect.
Yeah, I like that. You know, it's just very. It's a big change to this area, and stormwater heretofore was flowing relatively freely and had a large basin to back up into that is going to be eliminated by the fill that's being brought in the houses and parking, and so.
So it needs to be addressed because otherwise the property is not really going to be useful for anyone. This is something that has to be addressed no matter what.
And right now, I mean, it's an encumbrance on somebody who lawfully bought a piece of property and can't build because it's unlawfully being built. So the fact of the matter is it does need to be fixed. And I think the developer's going above and beyond what's required to fix it and not only what's on his site, but offering to go downstream and fix things that are required.
Well, I think there are real. Yeah, I think, you know, I'm an advocate of these types of developments. This one is in a location that has potential adverse impacts that if not engineered properly, and I don't doubt that they can be, needs to be addressed. I mean, in our standard, you're right. Okay, but you're detaining the 1-year storm. Well, it's a huge change for this area as to what's happening in larger events. And there are people downstream who are at risk. And there are people who will buy these homes that may be at risk if not done properly. So I think it'd be appropriate here to consider that 100-year, where it's going to go, and what impact it might have on those lots.
Are there any further thoughts from staff or representatives? Obviously, the staff felt it was adequate. I'm just curious to know what your interaction is.
we recommended to the planning board and to you recommended approval because it meets the regulations that the town has in place. And and in the opinion of staff, there is no damage to or impact, no increase in negative impacts to adjoining property owners from this development, that they are managing all of the impacts that they will be creating by doing this development. So the question then is, well, are our regulations adequate? Are our regulations sufficient to accomplish what our objectives are for the community? And that's a much larger question, of course. And you are working on a unified development ordinance that will raise some of those questions. But those aren't today's rules.
Any other questions from the board?
Well, I'd like to mention that the way the sewer is laid out, the public sewer is laid out, it too, if it were installed as is, would intersect with the bioretention cell. It's to be publicly maintained so that if, in fact, there were issues with that sewer line and it needed to be re-excavated, that it again would be interfering with the bioretention cell. And bioretention cell is a very special item, which is an expensive item to work in and around. And so I think there are ways to change the alignment of the public sewer routing so that it does not intersect with the bioretention cell. And I'd like to see that done.
I have a question for the developer. Would you guys be willing to put this 30-inch pipe in down to that lower creek if this comes to a vote?
Boy, I'd have to go with the recommendation of the engineer on that one, and having not, I mean, there may be some issues as to, you know, grade there and what will fit. I mean, I'm certainly happy to do what I can, but also, you know, in line with what's workable and what makes sense. I mean, I'm not trying to be wishy-washy, I just don't know enough about it, the particulars. Is that something we could
It's something we can
compute
certainly
with?
look at. I guess I would ask the question, what, besides the obvious of having a nice flat yard redone, you know, why would you want a closed conveyance system as opposed to an open? And then, I mean, you're talking the difference in tens of thousands of dollars. So there's a point at which, you know, being a nice neighbor turns to being taken advantage of. So I guess my question would be, look at it to see if it's possible, but what's the difference, or why the pipe instead of a close or so?
Jay, were you asking for a 30-inch pipe under the roadway, or?
From the other side, from the east side of Davie Street.
Oh,
what's the,
If there's a 30-inch pipe under the roadway and called for it, I think that what Ms. Farrell was suggesting is that we extend it past her house, you know, it's 150 feet or maybe a little more to the low-lying area in the back, with some significant large trees back there, all of which we have to take into consideration. If we start putting the pipe in and filling over top of it, what does it do to those trees? Can you even get the elevations to work? A swale is easier because you don't have to worry about burying a pipe. We can certainly look at whether or not you can bury a pipe, but again, burying a pipe is.
and I would think what distance we're talking about limit to, and not.
you're proposing a 30-inch?
I believe the cross culvert under Davie Street is 30 inch.
I think your plan's calling out 24.
Maybe it's a 24.
Yeah.
I'll be interested, where's the 30-inch in question that they owns? Is it parallel to the street?
I think she's asking for it from the end of the proposed culvert crossing, back 150 feet or 200 feet past her house.
Excuse me.
Going east and west, not going north and south. In the inward side here on the east side of the street, is it close connection to, or is it open, is there a catch basin?
On which side of the street?
As it crosses the street,
That right now is just, it's open, there's no catch basin, there's a ditch close to it, and that's it's a.
what she's asking for, would that be close connection or catch basin?
Right, and at that point, I don't even know that you can make the ditch work and put an inlet there to get the ditch to flow to an inlet, or get enough fill over a pipe to send it back as far as you're looking.
And where do we come up to 30 inches? Do we know that would take 25 inch storm or 50 inch storm? The source of the 30 inches is just this girl.
We were talking about,
Which, I mean, logically, the next pipe downstream would obviously be bigger than, you know, the cross culvert, so 30 inches would make sense, but again, it's more of a, can you get the existing ditches on Davie Street? If you did have to put a structure there to be able to pipe out, can you get those existing ditches to still flow and get into an inlet? Because when you put the structure in, you know, you're talking about raising the bottom of the ditch up a couple of feet. To get a 30-inch pipe, you probably need 4.5 feet. By the time you get a structure in a pipe, I just don't know that it's physically possible.
And again, this is required, this is. Okay, well, we've got a lot of questions for technical questions for this review, but what's the ability for it? Do you want to give the applicant an opportunity to address the commissioner's questions, make corrections and bring this back, or take some other actions? First of all, does the applicant understand, do you have a checklist of issues in mind, or at least figure that you feel ready to review this and write that down?
I think we have that.
And I think a realistic issue is that the inlet of that 24-inch pipe that's to carry the 25-year storm, I notice you've got a foot clear, and then you've got a grate around it, probably on 2-3 sides. The upstream, the furthest upstream component. Yeah.
You're talking about on the back, on the western side.
Yeah. So,
Where there's a weird, where it just flows into the south bottom.
right, you know, upstream of that is wooded area. There's going to be debris. It's going to get clogged.
Sure.
Big storm's going to come. Where's it? You know, the water's going to come through the neighborhood, through this neighborhood and these homes. And that's what I'm worried about, is that the 100-year storm that's going to overpower that pipe, and those storms when maintenance hasn't been done. Homeowners are going to be expected to go out there and clean that, keep it clear. I mean, I'd rather not even have the grate there. I'd rather just be open.
Right, but from a safety and, you know, we talked about children falling out of golf carts earlier.
There's no window.
Just as easily get swept into the.
Crawl into their, yeah.
Weird, so
Right.
I wouldn't design one without the grate there.
Well, it'll pose another issue. Another safety issue.
Do you want to enumerate and articulate checklist for them to talk about all that stuff?
Yeah, I don't think I can go back
You
to
think
the
that's what
No, it is not. It is not. But I think this is unique in that there's essentially a dam being created with the project. And where's that water going to go? Right now, it comes through this little drainage area that has the ability to overwhelm that 24-inch pipe under the road and back up into the yard and become a big pond. This development's going to take away that storage volume. And so it's going to come up and over.
This development is going to push that storage volume back up to the neighbor's property where the water's coming from. And with all due respect, the system was analyzed and looked at more than once by two PDs and designed with factor of safety to make sure that it was okay even in a 100-year storm. The pipe is sized for 25-year storm. There's overland flow for a 100-year storm. And again, the ordinance, we're well above and beyond the ordinance. Obviously, we can't design the world to withstand a 100-year storm. We do the best we can to toe the line between making sure that people are safe, the welfare and safety of the people that live there. You can't design everything to 100-year storms.
No, agreed. But I think this is a condition where I think it should be analyzed, and I think it should be documented.
Sure.
So that,
And it has been. With all due respect, it has been. It's in the stormwater report that's been reviewed by the PD, who is the town engineer.
Mhm.
We looked at the 100-year elevation and where it comes onto the site, and where it backwaters and all that stuff. It's been reviewed and approved, so.
yeah, and I think what I'm asking is for that documentation to be on this set of plans,
Okay.
so that people who are gonna follow this set of plans and create a plat from these plans will have that information available to them, so that when the builder does go to build a home, that they're aware of where this path is, because, lot 5, they're gonna build it in the way of that path and be not knowledgeable of it. Will they have to take measures to remediate or modify that flow path to protect the home?
Okay, let me make a suggestion here to move this forward. Clearly, Commissioner Fielder has some technical issues he would like to have resolved. So I think taking action on this tonight is probably not going to happen. But if we send the applicant away with the homework to address these technical issues, I think it's important that everybody has a clear understanding of what it is we're asking them to do. And I don't think we've achieved that yet. You might have some.
I'm happy to read back what I've got down and see if that's a comprehensive.
Okay. Do you want to do that orally, or would you like to have them send that to the manager?
I'd like to go over.
I'd like to hear our engineer also, so basically I would like to
Well,
later on.
yeah. Well, let me go ahead and, once you orally enumerate what you think your homework is, to make sure that you can discuss it.
I have one question, but I would like to just, for someone to visually show us what happens in a 100-year storm, so they
Sure.
can have plans.
I do. So there's a 100-year flow path. So water will back up here. It's right now from now on right here. Here, will be about. And if it does back up, it goes around where there's not a swale, but there is a berm, which acts the same way. It diverts the water down to the ditch on Davie Street, or it comes into the site. Where there's also, if you look at the cross section of the site kind of comes down, and then there's another berm, and then the center of the site is crowned. So it basically pushes the drainage out to along the sidewalks, where there's kind of the low-lying area where all the runoff from the site goes out, to get to the bioretention. So,
Sure, it's not necessarily that.
I'd like to know what that path is. The other thing is, right now, you also made mention of the flow path going onto the neighbor's property. Whereas heretofore, it comes off of the neighbor's property.
I mentioned it going around the backside of the berm,
Right.
not necessarily going onto the neighbor's property.
Well, it looks like the berm's right on that property line.
So it's 8 to 10 feet inside the property line.
The flow path, the water. That's right on the property. Yeah. So we're taking water that would have ponded on this parcel and asking it to now go route on the adjoiner's property. I think you put a swale there, not a berm.
We'll follow up by email. Follow up by.
Would you go ahead and orally enumerate what you think your homework is?
We've got the maintenance of the drainage pipe of the Davie Street. We look at how we maintain that, being that it's adjacent to the bioretention area. Verify the berm and that the bioretention is designed for the BMP manual.
And you're really getting that volume that you have, calculated.
Look at perimeter swales instead of diversion berms. call out what type of protective fencing or railing will be at the top of the retaining wall. Specify materials for the screenings, whether it be fencing, evergreen plantings, or a combination of the two. Setting finished floor, minimum finished floor elevations, and expanding more on the plans on where these are here, the leak cap is. Look at potentially rerouting the sanitary sewer to get that lake that's going to tie to the existing sanitary sewer on Davie Street. In a spot where it's easier to maintain without having to certify administrator. Verify that the weird design, and I can do this with another plan, that the weird design takes into account the 100-year storm and that it's designed for safety. It's also designed to have openings for people on the floor that it should.
What about the pipe on the east side property?
I've got another question, I guess, being, if and I guess it's more of a question for you, if physically a 30-inch pipe would fit to the east, is that something where the town or the adjacent owners willing to look at a cost share? And there's a significant difference between building a swale and putting down, you know, $25,000 to $30,000 worth of pipe.
And again, that's not the word. So I guess my next question is, if we've given the applicant a comprehensive list of what their expectations are for reworking this, he comes back and he satisfies all those. That seem like a great disservice. So if there are other concerns that board members have, I would ask if you raise them now and make the applicant aware of it. So he doesn't go back and do $4,000 or $5,000 for the work, only to go back and have his application denied. Any other concerns down the line?
I have just one, that Mr. Oden brought up at the planning board meeting, it was interesting, the land use plan is the home design and the site development not being compatible with the neighborhood. We're packing in 9 houses, homes right here on 1 acre lot, that's a lot. And I know it's in our ordinance, it was actually put in, I think I came on the board about a month or 2 after the leak, that was one of the first things, agreeing on that, and that was something.
Yeah, I think we did that for a pocket project over near Firestone Road, which was.
Yeah, that, I hope this looks nothing like that.
The new thing is Pittsboro Bridge is difficult, but that's, things are going to get more, as part of urban design, it's more efficient to have, closer to town is going to happen. The question is, too much, do we have so much that way for it's in compliance?
So if there are no other questions, I'll hear a motion to table this until the applicant brings it back with the corrected actions requested by Commissioner Fields.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, sir, yeah, I guess you have your marching orders, and we'll wait here for you when you are ready to receive this.
Thank you.
That's on the west side.